Well, hi everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and the stress is strong on this one today. That's a little better. Yeah, just sorry about the late start. I've been just hustling. I can't keep up with it. The faster you go, the further behind you get. It seems. So this is the first night on Thursday. Hopefully, we're going to try and be doing Thursday nights for a little while anyway. We're shooting in the mornings with Scott, which is late for Scott. He's up at 5. I don't know how he does it. God, what a pain. And anyway, so it's a longish kind of day for me if I'm here in the seat a little, about 7:30 or so. Right, Scott? Anyway, so we'll see how this works. So, but it's been a crazy busy day, and can you guys hear me? Is everything okay? It looks like it. I know. I was listening to the playback on the sound. It was kind of in and out and crummy. Today, the circuit breaker just blew at boom, and then it blew me again 3 times. Just went out. And so I had one of those just as we were getting ready to rumble here, and had to restart everything. And anyway, so here we are. I do have a couple tiny little things to show you. And because of the nature of this software, which is much, much better than what we were dealing with before, I am able to... I don't know if I don't even remember how to do this. I'm really losing it today, folks, honest to God. So let me see what I can do about this. First of all, I want to get these, just want to show you 2 pictures, if I can. Did the drives not come up? Oh, hooray. Oh, there they are. Wow. It is a very, very, very bizarre day here, and this isn't making my life any easier. So anyway, here we are. Yep, I got no access to my drives. I might be able to do it this way, but hang on. It's just nasty. I'll worry about it next week. Sorry about that. I'll get on it next week. Yeah, everything's been completely reset and blown. Plus, it's time to redo all of the... I just have to reload all of these things and just reinstall the operating system and all that jazz. It's just getting ridiculous. Anyway. So here we are. Boy, I sure would like to have those pictures. Can I just drag and drop them in there? Probably not, but I'll give it a whirl. Let's see. Any luck with this one? Hey, what do you know? I don't think... Well, maybe you can hear me. This is a big 4K image, but this is the latest render I did for this Aurora project. And this is one of our squadrons. Let's see if I can resize it here. Yeah, let's try this. I don't know. It's very, very dicey. Anyway, so this is part of our kind of latest on our squadron stuff. I think the faces are really, really getting better. I'm actually real happy with this. The guy who looks a bit like Sean Bean in the background, I like him very much. He just came late to the game, and I just wasn't crazy about his face, but then I aged the living crap out of him and gave him the beard, and all of a sudden he looks wicked cool. I kind of like the Viking guy. So the guy in the center there is John Boyd. That's his buddy Sledge there, with the arms crossed, looking happy. I haven't got names for all these people yet. Guy in the back, that Viking-looking dude, is just awesome. I love him. Lower left is Bonhoeffer. He's kind of their mechanical wizard. And then I have to scale her up a bit. I wanted Barnes, the girl in the foreground, to be short, but she's actually you know, I think she's like 3'6" or something in this. She's going to have to be a little head taller. I like the guy behind Sledge too, with the kind of clean cut kid. He's kind of short too, but that's okay. The guy behind him is Spud. It's all done in Daz Studio, yeah. And by the way, if you see the ads for Daz Studio, it's astonishing how awful they are, those ads. So I'm going to get these things in some kind of shape and send them in and see if we can get some cooperation with them, because I can't get their animation system to work to save my life in terms of things. Yeah, we need bigger budgets. And then so the guy in the back there behind Barnes is that's actually Bonhoeffer, and his code name is Spud. And I put him together to get him killed in the first 30 seconds of the first movie, but I ended up liking his face so much that I just decided to keep him. And then person on the right, I needed another woman. I got 2 women pilots out of 8, and I needed somebody who looked kind of hardcore without looking too nutty. So yeah, and there's Olimir in our comment section, our great friend Olimir, who arrived on the scene just out of nowhere from Greece. He's been a huge part of the online experience. By the way, congratulations to Lisa, Te amo Lisa, who has never played video games before in her life before starting this. And then she went out to this Daymar rally, which is a giant race they had on the planet Daymar. And some people were practicing for months and months and months. Lisa joined the second team we put up at the last minute, and she came in third. Beat the daylights out of a lot of people with a lot of experience. So that was great, and we're very, very proud of her. And she got a great interview afterwards on the the feed, and it just made all of us very, very proud. So congratulations there, Lisa. I've got one more I'm just going to show you real quick here. Yeah, this one is just a test. I just did this test earlier today, as a matter of fact. I'm just trying to get just trying to get these things to feel right if I can. So let's see. Let's try doing this. First of all, let's say goodbye to that guy. Do I wish to move eagles? Yes, I do. Hey, it's me. And then let's have a look at this one here, because I just did it. And I also, she's not an alien, by the way. She's just kind of tough. So this is a rendering I just did because you've seen some of these before, but I've just been working a little more on mood lately, not just the technology of things. So yeah, that fit in there pretty well. That went right in, fit perfectly. So I just did this earlier today, and it's just, this I can animate. I can do people moving, walking, kind of idling, and that kind of thing. I can't get them to do the movements I want yet, because I can't get. Daz has got the weirdest skeletons. I think they do it on purpose. They're just going to be stuck forever in Amateurville if they don't get that compatible with some other systems. But if they do, and if I can find somebody to do the software drag, well, my feed just locked up. Then we'll get them going. But I can do animations of things moving. And this is a good example of the kind of thing I can do actually pretty easily. Yeah, I know it's just very strange today, cutting in and out and freezing and all that other stuff. But I like the mood on this very much, and it took a long time to get the lighting coming out of the vehicle. And I'm going to animate this, and it's going to be basically going to just come crunching by the camera over the ice and just have little bumps to it. I can put people inside the cabin there, and I can have them move around and, look out windows and flip switches and all the rest of it. But I can't get anybody doing the kind of stuff I need to do for storytelling yet. And I am just going to have to find somebody who can do the conversions for me from the face capture stuff into Daz and the motion capture stuff into Daz. I've been trying to learn 4 or 5 different programs, and it's just not working. But yeah, I like this image a lot. I really do. I think it's just very cool. And so much for that. It's nice to kind of catch up on things. I have Oh, golly, should I? Yeah, you know what? I really shouldn't because I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to do it, though. I do it anyway. All right. No, I'm not. I'm going to save it. Never mind. So we're going to do some questions here and get on with things. I've got, before I go home, I've got a lot of bookkeeping stuff still to do. That's going on in the back room now. It's a busy world out there. However, certain forces are working. The little elves are making shoes, in the workshop as we speak at nighttime. He'd better be making shoes anyway. And I think by this time next week, we'll have some pleasant surprises. We didn't do a super great job on rolling out that last website. So basically, we've spent a lot of time and effort and some money getting a situation where the website will be a one-button adventure. It's just going to be a one-button adventure. Get you signed in. You'll be able to control all of your credit card stuff, all of the stuff that we heard loud and clear. We're working on getting all that stuff done. And hired a couple of software code writers Scott did. Hired him to we got this thing down to a two-step process, and then we hired him again to get it down to a one-step process. The hope is that you will sign in one time and you will never have to worry about it again. It'll just be done, and you'll have access to all of the, I'm talking about the members, have access to all of the account info and all that stuff and everything it should have been from the beginning. That's what we're hoping it will be. So I think it's not unheard of to think we might be able to do this by next week. So much for that. Otherwise, I think it's going to be good. I think we'll try and get. I took a lot of comfort from hearing you guys talking about your opinions on the kind of quarterly fund drive for my beautiful wife who never. Let's zoom in a little. Why don't we? Who never ever ceases to amaze me. And one of the things she does that amazes me all the time is she makes connections in English that I would never have imagined because, I grew up with the words. But she's the one who said, fund drive? I said, fund drive. I like fund drive better. And many, many others that have escaped my memory right now. Razor and Racer, and we were talking about having to do that race, and we were all going to go out there and be racers and razors. Some interesting connections sometimes. Hey, honey, hope you're watching. I'm pretty sure you are. So, let's answer some questions, why don't we? And then hopefully by next week I'll be a little less fradazzled and bring in a couple of other things. And plus, those things I was just about to show you, I will actually send out privately, and then I'll debut them next week. But let's just say that some of the people who are watching now will be very, very happy and laugh and laugh and laugh. And some of the people, or at least one of them anyway, who's presumably watching now, will not be happy at all. You're joking, Scotty. You know what? Fine. Give you and I'll tell you why this is okay with me. I just got a live in the Stratosphere Lounge stream. My right angle was on parsing the pledge because, as you may have heard, the Santa Barbara School District, something or other, university, something, decided to cut the Pledge of Allegiance. So I decided to do a show on the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not just another agency banning the pledge. That's old news now. I just decided, they said that the Pledge of Allegiance, when they decided to kick it out, they said it was based on white nationalism and divisiveness. And so the three of us just took a look at it line by line. It's like, liberty and justice for all, republics protect minorities and all the rest of it. Anyway, Scott Ott just tells me he's posting that up on YouTube, and YouTube has declined monetization on the one about the Pledge of Allegiance. Interesting that, you can have video game commentary by guys like PewDiePie, who, by all accounts, is a pretty cool guy, actually. And so, and you can have people's heads being blown off, and you can have all the cursing you want to. But if you talk about God, apparently, if you put God in the search bars, that's enough to get you demonetized for that one. So here's what I say, Scott. I say to hell with them. Go ahead and put the stuff in there. Make it as easy to find as possible, and we'll demonetize that one. What else is new? But now you know one of the reasons why we're really looking forward to, and I think hopefully we'll start next week doing a fund drive, because this kind of thing has been going on and on and on and on and on, and they're determined to put us out of business, and they have succeeded with other people, and they're not going to succeed with us, because we're just plain not going to give up. But we're going to need some partners in order to do that. So hopefully you'll be able to kick in a little bit of cash if you're one of those people who are not a member. It's going to go on and say, just for the final time on this tonight, that this fund drive is specifically, and I mean specifically, aimed at anybody who's not a member. I do not expect or want a member to kick in a dime on that. You guys are doing a lot of heavy lifting already, and this is not directed at you at all. But there's a lot of people out there who have been watching these shows all, 70 million views or something like that. And I give them a chance to play on the team. Reason I said, by the way, Scott, that I'm just happy to go ahead and post it is because they backed down. They actually did. The good guys won one. This guy said that the Pledge of Allegiance was white nationalism and hateful, and the country gave him and the entire board an earful. And now the Pledge of Allegiance is back in again. Hurrah! Tavaruchi. That's good. It's a shame that you have to make a fuss out of everything. But if they're going to make a fuss to pull it down, and we make another fuss to put it back up again, I guess I'll take it. Prager University, the lawsuit. I don't know what the latest on the lawsuit is. I did hear when they first went to court, and I knew they lost the first round, that I forget what the numbers were, but I think Prager was able to calculate that of all of their viewers, the picture went out to 2% of their total people that had liked Prager in order to see the videos. 2%. So a bunch of people are talking about Subscribestar. I know nothing about it, but if I had to guess, I would say that is an alternative to the YouTube subscription thing, or I don't know. I'm sure people will tell me in a minute. But in any event, I wish Prager University the very best. The only people that seem to have made this thing really work is Daily Wire. That is just a beautifully run. Subscribestar is a Patreon alternative. Yeah, we're not in a big hurry to go to Patreon after Patreon just decided, I don't like this guy's politics. Not his Patreons, not his patrons, but we the guys around the camp don't particularly like him, so we're just going to demonetize his account, shut it all down after you've gotten all those patrons up there. So, don't be surprised if this fund drive actually leverages this, and what I mean by leveraging it is, look, YouTube's trying to put us out of business. Patreon's decided they want to put people out of business. They don't like their politics. They're all trying to shut us down, and we need you to step up. They've got billionaires, and we've got you. But Daily Wire is really, really well done, and my hat's off to Jeremy and the whole crowd over there. They've done an amazing job, and just keep expanding, and it's just a beautifully run company. It hires a lot of conservatives. It hires, I'm pretty sure this number's correct. I think they hire 25 times more people than we do. Not 25 more people, 25 times the number of people that we do. So for every one of us, there's 25 of them, and God knows they do great work. I'm not taking a thing away from them. But it's, I don't know, just every now and then when we get into things like late starts on Stratosphere Lounge and so on and so on, it probably is nice to say every now and then we basically put out everything we do with 3 people, and they've got a much bigger number than that. And we do 10 shows a week. Unless Scott Ott decides he wants to slack off another week, sit around and on the couch and watch Judge Judy and drink his Sterno, which I'm pretty sure is responsible for last week's little gap. But in any event, they're doing well, and we don't need anything like their resources, but it'd be nice to get them anyway. So there's that. The other thing, the Aurora Project pitch continues to improve. Talked about it down in Ramona last Saturday, and once again, I tell them what it is I'm trying to do, and I'm getting this more and more refined, and their eyes just light up, So bring me the head of a pig, right, Scott? And I guess it's time to move on to the question part of our show. Your host is obviously pretty scattered tonight, more so than usual, and that's really quite an accomplishment. You think about it. So let's go over to the Facebook page, shall we? And I would like to personally thank Mark Zuckerberg for allowing us to continue to connect the way that he has. It's extremely kind of him, really, when you think about it. And I know that the first thing I want to do when I grow up is, be a sociopath and start my own social network firm and make decisions about the future of humanity with absolutely no regard to the consequences. And I'm not talking about just Facebook. I'm talking about things like AI and intrusion into everything and open borders and all the rest of it. Mark Zuckerberg strikes me as a guy who's exceedingly good at Facebook and doesn't know jack about much anything else. But in any event, let's look at Facebook so we can see what our questions are for the day. Yes, it'd be nice, though, wouldn't it be nice to raise money by saying, here's your chance to stick them in the eye. And I mean that in the figurative sense of the word. I don't want to really stick anybody in the eye. Okay, here we go. So in the order that they appear before my eyes on my computer, Angela Contreras says, is anyone going to be challenging New York's baby murder law in court? If so, why has it not happened yet? Anytime Donald J. Trump tries to do anything, there's a legal challenge response almost immediately. That's a great question, isn't it? For those of you who have not heard, is it New York City or New York State? I know it's New York City. It's maybe the state as well. I guess it must be. They've decided that abortion is legal up until birth. If you change your mind about having your baby while you're about to be getting your anesthesia in the hospital, if you change your mind then and you decide rather than giving birth to the baby, you decide you'd rather have it just killed, then okay, that's all right with the state of New York. This is a third rail topic, abortion, and there are many different opinions on it on the right. But this is just horrifying and disgraceful. And for all of them, it's in New York State, and for all of them, all of these progressives that are doing their chest thumping, showing how unbelievably morally advanced they are. See, they're so advanced that they're ready to kill a 9-month-old child. And what could be more advanced than that? What could be a greater sign of love and respect for women than making that legal. We live in a time that is just. We live in a time that cannot continue, because there's no way that a society can continue with this kind of legal code based on this kind of moral code. So we good guys have to stick together. It's one of the reasons why we do this show. Yeah, it's unbelievable. And you know, the thing is, they're also, you can tell that on some level, I think these people are just so proud of themselves, and I bet they can't wait to tell their European betters at the next film festival that they finally caught up to Europe, that they have the same abortion laws that Europe has. But it turns out I don't believe there's any country in Europe where you can have an abortion after the first trimester. So it turns out we're even more advanced than they are. What do you know? I don't know. You know, I just don't know what to do about it. I really don't. Comes a point when you realize that there's only, all you can do is all you can do. And at that point, justice is up to somebody else. And what do you say about that? You know? Angela, I don't know what to tell you, but your interesting point about the legal presence, right? So Donald Trump decides he wants to use his constitutional authority to defend the United States against armed invasion, and some judge somewhere decides to block this. This is an absolute mystery to me how they get to do it. He's just decided to block it. And so now we go through this thing. Great line, Steve. He just is not allowed to do anything. And then something like this happens, and of course we're powerless. Steve Darrow put this better than I've ever seen it ever. He just wrote, you can actually kill a baby up until the time that it commits a capital offense. That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, you can murder your kid unless he commits murder. And if he commits murder, then the death penalty is an abomination. I don't know what to say about this, and I don't really feel like continuing on this topic other than to say, again, you know, it's not a question of religion. It's not a question of I think we're way past issues of gun control and abortion and all of this back and forth. I, honest to God, think it's just now it is down to there are people who are good people and people who are evil people. And I don't know how you can push a law like that and still face yourself. I can certainly understand why women would have an abortion. I can certainly understand scared young women who might be abandoned by their boyfriend or husband or whatever. I can understand all of this. I can. But what I cannot understand is who would make a push to write laws like that. The only politician I ever heard who talked about abortion that late is the only politician I've ever heard saying that babies, unwanted babies, should be killed after they're born. After they're born. There's only one person I've ever heard say that in politics on the radio, and that person was Barack Obama. He said it before he became a senator. He was saying, he was basically saying, you know, it's not fair to the mother if after delivering the baby she decides that, you know, she doesn't want to take care of it. So, you know, some nurse gets fired because she's got a live infant in there, and Barack Obama is just, I've heard him with my own ears, I've heard his voice, basically saying, you know, that this is groovy stuff. You know, it's interesting. Well, first of all, just the fact that I'm married is interesting. The fact that I'm married to somebody this exceptional is interesting because she's always teaching me things and always saying remarkable insights on things. But I have to tell you, it's strange, and not pleasant to hear somebody who grew up in the Soviet Union looking at things that happen in America with just plain shock and disgust. That's not easy for me to take, you know, that this kind of news shocks Russians, that they can't believe it, that I hear this all the time from Natasha. When we talk about things that the left does and how inverted things are, she tells her mom, tells her daughter back in Russia, and they can't believe that she's serious. They can't believe it. They're sure she's kidding. There's no way this could happen in any kind of a civilized society. You know, well, someday, someone might come along who understands these conservative values and who has enough of a heart and enough of a brain to stand out in front of these people and say, why are the Democrats so determined to murder black children? Why are they so determined to do this? Why, from Margaret Sanger, has this been a top priority for them? Why? More black children aborted now than born. Why? Why? Who do you think gets the enormous majority of these abortions? What is it about black people that Democrats hate so much that they will not let them vote their own mind, that they will not let them create their own futures, and now are determined to exterminate as many of them as they can before they get out into the world? What is it about Democrats and their policies? Why is it that Democratic policies have created these murder pits where there's, 3 or 4 young black men murdered every single week, or probably more like 10 every single week in every single major city in this country? And it's all the Democrats, and all they're doing is trying to kill as many black people as they can. And I want to know why. When you have a politician who's ready to speak in that kind of language, then it's over. It's over. And somebody has to have not just the courage, but the conviction, and also the just enough horsepower to be able to put these simple things together, but go to the heart of it. They constantly beating us with this moral argument, and it's just, we've got to, and it's so easy to defeat them morally. And this is the thing, I just can't find anybody who understands this, really. It's not about, hey, it's a better argument. It is a better argument, and it's a better economic system, and it's a better government. All of that's true. But it's not just better, it's morally better. It's good in the capital G sense of the word. This is doing good in the world, is fighting this fight. And it just, well, I guess if it were easy, it wouldn't be, they wouldn't need to bring out the best in people, huh? If it were easy. Moving on. Top fan, Dave Olson. So, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, alive, dead, encased in carbonite? I'm more worried about the carbonite, really, than anything else. And to be perfectly honest with you, if I had to guess, Dave, I'm gonna say the carbonite is the actual most likely case. And I'm not too, I'm pretty much serious about that. Because when Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, there will not be a replacement. Donald Trump will not put, I don't think, anybody on the court in place of her who's not a super liberal. I suspect that they would do anything up to and including walking out, removing the quorum, anything to stop this. And so when I say I think she's going to be encased in carbonite, I think the most likely outcome is, although we're stronger in the Senate than we were before the election, and the House has nothing to say about this one. So if I hope Ruth Bader Ginsburg makes a full recovery and spends the rest of her days with her grandchildren, is very happy. I don't ever want to get to the point where I'm wishing for people to die because I disagree with their politics. But I think it'd be good for the country if she's stopped making rulings the way she's made them. And I have a feeling that, I've forgotten her name now, there's a really strong female candidate that Trump had, and I thought for sure he was going to put her up in place of Kavanaugh. And then I realized, oh, he's saving her for Ginsburg. He has to do that. I mean, he doesn't have to do anything. It'd be nice if he didn't have to do anything. Barrett, Amy Barrett. But he's going to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He's going to try and replace her with Amy Barrett. And when this happens, and it's going to happen, I wish her the very best recovery, and I hope she takes it easy. I'd like to not see her ever back on the court again, but that's as far as I go with it. But with that said, I don't think she's coming back, and we saw Dave, we saw kind of exponential outrage and hooliganism on the part of the Democrats. So when you had a conservative Scalia die, and you replace him with Neil Gorsuch, you have the typical outrage that comes with any nominee who's a conservative to the Supreme Court, which is a lot of outrage and a lot of huffing and puffing. And then a moderate left the court and was replaced with a conservative, and then you got huffing and puffing squared. And that was Brett Kavanaugh. And if you think that was ugly, when the big liberal, not a big liberal, the big liberal goes and Trump appoints a conservative, you're going to see huffing and puffing cubed, or to the 5th or to the 10th. We've talked about this before, but it just really needs to be said. They will fight to the death for this, because this is how they run the country. This is how they control the country. Everything that the left did in the 60s, they essentially did through the courts. Nobody voted for this stuff. People didn't vote for Obamacare. Not a single Republican vote, not deemed to have passed, all of this stuff. They do everything through so basically they legislate from the court. They make the court decide that no matter what the American people want in terms of legislation, if the left doesn't like it, the court will overturn it. And that helps them not have to go backwards. And in order to go forwards, they can look at something of the status quo, convince 5 people that that this is not in our interest, and then the court will simply just go out there with this kind of judicial activism and overturn existing laws and situations. And so it's a break when they're being pushed in reverse, and it's an accelerator when they're trying to go forward. And they can't ruin the country without it. They can't do what they want to do without the Supreme Court. So I think you want to talk about a fight to the death. It's going to be horrific. But I think she'll be encased in carbonite. And I think if this were to happen tomorrow, and Donald Trump nominates somebody, you're looking at a year and 9 months before the next election, and another 2 months after that before you get a new Congress or president. If she were to go tomorrow, I have no doubt whatsoever they would find a way to stall for almost 2 years, stall for 20 months. And that's the idea of Ruth Bader Ginsburg being encased in carbonite. She's neither here nor there. Even if she were to die, her seat would still be filled by, the carbonite block of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The good news there is that the carbonite block doesn't get to vote. So it seems to me that what they'd rather do is, instead of find themselves on right now they're looking at a 5-4 court for conservatives. If she goes and they replace her with a conservative, it'll be a 6-3 court. That's an actual margin. So I suspect that they will just do everything they can to block that, and it will be a 5-3 court with eight members until they can get their liberals back. This is the thing. I keep getting. I'm constantly embarrassed, and I'm embarrassed at being disappointed, and I'm embarrassed at being disappointed in the quality of the people that are up against us in this fight. I just wish they were. I wish they were better people, but this is how it works. If they can't win by the rules, then they change the rules. And if they can't win by changing the rules, then they ignore the rules. Now, as Eric says, you can probably find a way. I suspect it might be even easier, as I said, with the Senate now more in our position, to actually do it. And if you actually do it, then no matter what you may think about Donald Trump in terms of his negatives, replacing a conservative, a moderate, and the arch liberal with 3 conservatives is a lifetime. It's a lifetime win. That's a win that's going to stay around as long as most of us are around. It's an enormous win. And I remember right immediately after the election, when the progressives realized what had happened, there was a lot of heat directed at Ginsburg for having not retired during Obama's term, because she was not exactly a spring chicken in 2016. And I actually thought myself, why didn't she retire during Obama's term? And then I realized the reason she didn't retire during Obama's term was there was no chance whatsoever that Donald Trump was going to win that election. Not a chance. Couldn't happen. Absolutely impossible. You had a 20-knot, 30-knot headwind at the polls, meaning the press coverage is swinging the vote 30, 40 points from one side to another. You can't lose under a situation like that, except that sometimes you can. It's so interesting to me that Donald Trump is the only person that could have beaten Hillary Clinton, and any other Democrat would have beaten Donald Trump. That's what I think. I think it was like kind of Clash of the Titans, I think anybody else would have beaten Donald Trump, and I don't think Donald Trump could have beaten anybody. Well, obviously, I don't think Donald Trump could have beaten anybody other than Hillary Clinton, and vice versa. Hillary Clinton, I think, would have beaten anybody else. The only person she couldn't beat would be Donald Trump, because Donald Trump's the only person who's prepared to fight as dirty as they do, and God bless him for it. I'll just keep reiterating this point. I don't care if I go over it 100,000 times. The most brilliant thing that I have ever seen in politics, ever, was at the second debate when Hillary was about to start the big Republican War on Women campaign. And Donald Trump had the political genius to put 5 of Bill Clinton's rape victims front and center. And you could see the expression on Bill Clinton's face. He took away Hillary Clinton's most powerful weapon in that one move. And he didn't just take it away for the night, he took it away for the duration. That if he hadn't done that, he would have lost the election. Hillary couldn't play the woman card. She couldn't play the woman card because Donald Trump comes out and says, kind of funny, you're talking so much about fairness to women when you were married to a guy who was raping people in the White House, and you were the person who primarily destroyed the lives of the women that be coming forward. Yeah, and because you'd be in prison, that was the highlight of the campaign. What did she said something? I think I'd be afraid if Donald Trump was elected, and Trump, because you'd be in prison. That's genius. That's genius. So anyway. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think this is going to go on much longer, to be honest with you. I think they would encase her in carbonite and keep her breathing on a respirator if they could. We did a show where just a little while ago was a right angle where we were Scott. I think it was Scott Show. He's talking about this guy, this writer who said, if only one person, if only you could give 1 minute of your life, if only every one of us out there could give 1 minute of our life, she'd be able to serve out the rest of Trump's term and serve out the rest of the term. If only we could give 1 minute from our life each and give it to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which to me is the absolute definitive progressive statement. In a nutshell, you don't have to go any further than that. The reason it's a perfect progressive statement is because It's so collectivist. It's so elitist. It's so merciless. It's so hero worshipping. And most of all, it's just not possible. So to sit there and lament about the fact that I can't take a minute off of my life and give it to Ruth Bader Ginsburg and to talk about it and think about it, pray about it, write an article about it, it's like, well, if, if healthcare were free, I'd be in favor of free healthcare. So anyway, so much for that. Moving on. Mike Massetti. Bill, you must have thought of this at least once. Question, why don't you do long-form interviews kind of like Joe Rogan does on his podcast? The expense would be minimal, and since there's little to no editing, we would get a good amount of what we all love hearing you talk. Thank you, Mike. It's very kind of you to say, although I really don't think anybody's quite as fond of hearing me talk as I seem to be. We did a long format series of interviews, which I liked and I thought was really good. After hours, as usual for me, I had to just really produce the daylights out of that thing to get it looking good. And I thought it looked great. I thought it sounded great. And we did 7, 8, 9 of them, something like that. And each one of the interviews generated a 4 or 5, 6 segments. They're still in the can. They're very good. I think I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud of the speakeasy thing that we did, that live show we did. But both of them require staffing, and it's the kind of thing that you need somebody constantly booking people and scheduling them and getting them up and running, and then you've got a whole editing team and stuff downstream, and it's just something beyond our capability right now. Although if the fund drive turns out to be as much fun as we think it would be, who knows? We're going to list our stretch goals, and that could certainly be one of them. And besides, I've done a number of interviews, and it's almost like your question contained the root of its own answer. If you want to hear me talking, then an interview show where I'm doing the interviewing is not the way to go. I've always felt that if you're going to interview somebody, your job is to ask the questions and then shut up. And so I just did an interview with Dave Sussman here yesterday from Whiskey Radio. Another great interview. He's a great interviewer. We talked for an hour. I'll see when it comes out. Make a link to it, but it was great. Talked about a bunch of great things, but I don't have the time to really hear what other people have to say, and it's an awful lot of work. Otherwise, I would do it because I personally enjoy it very much. Moving on here. Hey, top fan Steve Darrow says I may have been binge watching too many time travel type shows on Netflix, but if you could erase Karl Marx from history, would you? How would the world be different if Karl Marx's mama hadn't met Karl's daddy? Would his awful ideas still have surfaced in some other form without him? My hypothetical is based on the existence of Marxist ideology as a science instead of just a collection of stupid ideas. I wonder if the power of having it been formalized into an ism carries weight with the useful idiots. That's a fine question. Here's my first response to this. Time travel parody, Steve, and with the caveat that this is as impossible as what I just suggested with the Ruth Bader Ginsburg thing, but this at least presents some interesting historical connections. When you said as I was reading it in the middle of the sentence, I thought, okay, so if I go back and knock off anybody, would it be Karl Marx or would it be Hitler or Stalin? And then I realized, wait a minute. If you take out Karl Marx, you don't get Hitler or Stalin. You don't get either of them. Hitler entire first half of the time before he became chancellor, after World War I and before he became chancellor in 1933, so right up from 1919 right up until 1927, 28, 29, something like that. He was basically, the National Socialists were a street fighting party. And the National Socialists came to power because they were the only people in Germany who were willing to fight the communists with fists and bats and beer mugs out on the streets. That's where they got their power. So if you don't have Marx, you don't get Hitler, and you don't get Stalin either, or Lenin. And the thing that's so tragic about this is that now it's entirely possible, of course, that somebody else could have done it. I don't know. Maybe I've never understood the appeal of it. I don't find the idea interesting. I find it reprehensible, and I don't find it well written or any of that stuff. But in any event, I think the reason Marx had the impact that he did was that there was probably a 20-year window somewhere in there where you could be Karl Marx. And if you were born before that or after that and you're Karl Marx and you write the same things, it's not going to catch fire. The reason that Marxism took off the way it did was we were deep enough into the Industrial Revolution for almost all of society to be moved into industrial jobs. And at the same time, we're still so early in the Industrial Revolution that the conditions were simply unbelievable. Unbelievable. The conditions of, again, my personal family conditions, which I've gone to some detail looking into. If you get a chance, I've mentioned this before, if you get a chance to read The Road to Wigan Pier, Wiggan, by George Orwell, the second half of it's just bilge, but the first half of it is an extraordinary description of what being a British coal miner is all about. And little things you never forget, like the fact that these guys had scabs and calluses over each one of their vertebrae from banging up against the ceiling, because their ceiling is 3 feet tall, and they're walking along bent over. That many of these people, after being down in the caves, in the mines for a while, started to look like they'd been tattooed, because if they get the tiniest little cut, and you're getting coal shards flying everywhere at high speed, you're smashing them into with a pick and stuff. These little tiny razor sharp coal shards cut your face. The problem is that once they cut your face, there's so much coal dust in the air that it immediately gets filled with coal dust, heals up with coal dust in it, and it becomes a tattoo. That's a big problem. And so he had to come at a time when conditions for working people were so unbelievably intolerable that everybody, up to and including aristocrats and intellectuals, thought that this was a good idea, only because what they were seeing in the world of capitalism was just so appalling that they were desperate for something else. Now, this is the nice thing about this audience. Not 47 yet. Said, what about killing Gavrilo Princip just before he shoots Archduke Franz Ferdinand? The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 starts the First World War. And if you get into the details about the first couple of weeks of the war, really even the first couple of hours of the war, you have a sense, watching the First World War get started reminds me of that scene in, what's it called? Oh my God. I should know this. It just slipped out of my head. It's the Steven Spielberg movie about a slave ship. I want to say it's Amadeus, but it's not. It's anyway. There's a scene in that movie which will appear in the comment section in about 5 seconds, where they've decided they either don't have enough food for some of the slaves or whatever. Amistad, thank you. So what they do is they have a line of 15 or 20 slaves chained together, and they pitch a weight over, and each one of them is pulled off the boat into the ocean to drown one by one, but very quickly. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. And that's how the beginning of World War I feels to me, is that everybody's chained to this weight, and nobody can stop it. The only person who could have stopped it was the Kaiser. But the reason I think that's probably even a better choice, because if you don't have World War I, you don't have Marxism either. At least I don't think so. You know, World War One. The World War One destroyed optimism. It destroyed optimism and belief in ourselves. The death camps and stuff that we discovered after World War II put the final nails in the coffin. But World War One was so awful and killed the very best people. It killed the very, very best people, especially in Britain. These were extremely decent, very civilized, gentle, kind people. They were poets and engineers and writers. They were just these fresh-faced kids. And then this giant war starts, and they haven't had a real war for 100 years. And they're marching out there to do Napoleonic tactics with machine guns and barbed wire, flower of a generation to say the least. And as I said before, Sorticus just said it twice. You know, England. The reason England fell apart after World War II is they lost the best people in their generation, and then a generation later they lost the best people of that generation too. But when you see the quality, and I don't mean the quality in terms of high quality. I mean just the characteristics of the men that went to World War One. They may have been the best people that we ever produced. World War II produced the greatest generation, and they were by far the toughest generation. If you had people from World War II fighting World War I, there'd be no question in my mind who would win. I think the World War II Americans would kick the daylights out of the World War I Americans or whoever. Because by that point, everybody lost faith and hope in religion, humanity, progress, all of that stuff. But the First World War soldiers, at least in the beginning, and not even in the beginning, right after the beginning. In the beginning, the British were fighting with their professional army. The British Army was, a small army, and it was made up of, basically lifelong soldiers. It wasn't very big. And after the war started and the trenches start to happen and all the maneuvering is over, they realize they're going to need a lot more men. And so Kitchener, who was the what we had been Minister of Defense, War Minister. Anyway, Kitchener was a very popular British general from previous wars, and it's actually Kitchener who first did the "I Want You." The "I Want You" picture of Uncle Sam is actually a direct photocopy ripoff of Kitchener's World War I campaign. But Kitchener had the idea when he started needing troops in 1914 and 15. He had the idea that he would form PALS regiments, and his idea was we'd be able to recruit people if we promised them that they could serve together. That's why they called it PALS regiment. You would go down, and you would go with your buddies. And if you joined up, you'd be basically guaranteed that you would all serve in the same unit. So you get to be friends. And we're friends now, and we're friends out there. We'll have a jolly good adventure and all the rest of it. And there are many things wrong with that. But the most heartbreaking was when you had a situation like the Somme or Operation Michael in the end of the war, 1918. When you have that kind of bloodshed, certain units take it on the chin. If there's a British assault and there's, for the sake of the argument, 100 British regiments and 15 or 20 of them are on the point, those regiments are going to be essentially wiped out almost to the man. And if you wipe out a PALS regiment, you've wiped out an entire village. You've taken all the men out of that village, all the young men out of that village. That kind of 70, 80, 90% casualties are not spread around the country. It's right there in this little town. Everybody's gone. They wake up one morning and they hear there was some giant battle and the Lancashire 14th PALS Regiment was basically destroyed to a man, and that neighborhood has lost everyone. it really is a kind of a don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. Everybody's seen Saving Private Ryan. Same idea. Saving Private Ryan's based on an actual story. In World War II, there were 5 brothers called the Sullivans. They all enlisted in the Navy together. And I want to say they were on the, was it the Juneau, the Anchorage? I'm pretty sure it was named after Alaska. Anyway, it was a cruiser, and all 5 brothers were aboard. And the cruiser sank, and 4 of the brothers were killed. 5th brother, the eldest one, the Juneau, I thought so, yeah, thanks. The 5th brother made it out and got on the raft. And he was the oldest brother. And what they didn't tell the parents, the Sullivan parents, they didn't tell anybody until well after the war, essentially was that Juneau good, was that John Sullivan survived. He was on the raft, went out to rescue people who were on individual life jackets and stuff. He went out, grabbed a guy, swam him back to the raft, went out, grabbed another guy, swam back to raft, went out, grabbed a 3rd guy, and that 3rd guy got torn apart by sharks. And then a few minutes later, Sullivan, I think it was George Sullivan, also torn apart by sharks. He's there, and next thing you know, there's a scream and thrashing water and blood, and he's gone, disappeared. Horrible way to go. So after that, they decided they're not going to put people in the same unit together, and they in fact named a destroyer the Sullivans, and that name has never left. I think we still have a Sullivan's, a USS. It's interesting. It's we name our destroyers usually after Marine Corps heroes, Marine Corps or naval heroes, but most often Marine Corps. And so you'll have the Navy admirals. I was on board the Spruance, and and then there's the names of all of these guys who are individual heroes in the Marine Corps. But there was one ship, and its name was the USS The Sullivans. It wasn't USS Sullivan. It was USS The Sullivans. Really interesting, and I'm just so deep into that naval history now, and the more I read about Battle of Leyte Gulf, the more amazed I become. And as usual for me, once I find something that I really get interested in, I drill down to it so deep I actually feel I could probably write a master's thesis on the Battle of Leyte Gulf now. And it's not that I'm a particularly great historical mind, but certainly, without question, I could write a master's thesis that would get me past universities today. Oh, I'm eating your face. Who's here? Hey, buddy, how are you? We see him out in the universe. Said he served on the Bella Wood and the Bonhomme Richard, and I didn't know that. Thank you. That's good. I didn't know that about you. Bonhomme Richard. That's an interesting name. Those ships are amazing. I was on an Aegis class destroyer, and I was so impressed. And then I read about all these new ships that Japan is building, 7 destroyers for every one that we build. And that's alarming. And then I start telling myself things to make me feel better, and this is something I worry about quite a lot. I worry when I start to justify these things, I start to wonder whether or not this is true or whether or not I want it to be true. One thing I'm sure of is if I assume it's true, then we're going to get bitten. But basically what I'm saying is this. The Russians will announce they've got an airplane, or the Chinese. We've got a stealth fighter, and it's an F-22 killer, and it's an F-35 killer, and it's going to go up there and it's going to wipe the sky of these American planes. And my response to that is, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think the technology is as good. I don't think the weapons systems are as good, but I know for an absolute certain fact the training is not as good, and that's what it all comes down to. You got 2 pilots, 2 Air Force pilots, and you put one of them in a good plane and one of them in a mediocre plane or even a bad plane, the good pilot's going to win. And so when I hear the Chinese talking, this is going to destroy the Navy and this is going to do this and this is going to do that, I'm not impressed because combat does 2 things. It has a way of testing weapons platforms. If you've got A problem with the M2 Bradley as an exception to the rule, M4 Sherman being a much better example. You take what you think is a good idea out into the field, and it turns out to be not such a good idea. That costs people's lives. And so it's not just that our hardware has been flight tested and sea tested. It's also, I cannot imagine that a China, well, I already know this isn't true because no one else can do this. No one else does it. But nothing out there looks anything like the Navy when the Navy's launching and recovering aircraft. I mean, it's true. I've seen Su-33s landing on a Russian aircraft carrier, and I've seen them launching, and the Su-33 is not a bad airplane, and it's got some capabilities. But when I watch them doing their operations, and they have one carrier, one. China's got one, maybe a second one coming up. Britain just launched their Queen Elizabeth class. India has a carrier. French have a couple carriers. But nobody does. The only two people in the history of the world ever did carriers, and that's the Americans and the Japanese. And I'm not convinced. So the question is, if they build 7 destroyers or 9 destroyers for every one of ours, does that mean that they're going to kick our asses? And we got a big head start in terms of numbers. We got a big head start in terms of the dollars spent. And the part I worry about is that I worry when I start worrying about this, I start telling myself things like, okay, well, they may have the ships, but they don't have the operational capability. They don't have the training. They don't have the crew. They don't have the morale. And then I wonder, is this how Pearl Harbor happens? Are we just completely underestimating these people? So I would like to think that it's true, but I would certainly not plan on it. I would certainly plan on being ready for them, but all of our warts are out on display militarily, and none of theirs are. The Chinese, as it turns out, somebody may correct me on this or back me up on it, as the case may be. The Chinese are as bad or worse than the Japanese when it comes to inter-service rivalries. The Japanese army was not informed that the Japanese Navy was going to go fight the Battle of Leyte Gulf. They were not told about it. Or if they were told about it the day before the event happened. And if it hadn't been for that, if there's so many cases where the Japanese Army and Navy were not only not cooperating, they were just on completely different books. And if they had cooperated, we'd be in a lot more trouble. My understanding is that China has a great deal of this inter-hostile, kind of thing. So anyway, people are apparently tired of hearing about the Navy, so that's what we'll do is we'll end a little talk about the Navy. But regardless of the Navy or Special Forces or their latest F-35 killer, whatever, first of all, you have to see it tested in combat. Secondly, you have to develop tactics and strategies for it that work. And you don't go out in the field and find these things the right way, the right time. You have to lose people and learn hard lessons. And we've learned those hard lessons. This military is the most combat-hardened, lethal force that we've ever had. And so I'm encouraged about that. I was very pleased by the look on the executive officer of the Pasadena's face. I was exceedingly pleased, as a matter of fact. We were submerged almost 2 years ago, maybe 2.5, and we were under the Pacific at 600 feet below the surface doing 22 knots. And I got a chance to talk to the executive officer for a while, and he's basically showing me a display of what is essentially the inverted analog of airspace. He's showing me sea space off of San Diego, blocked off areas. We got this is an area for training. Here's a weapons thing, all this other stuff, and so on. It's kind of cool. And I asked him, I said, so, what do you guys do, when somebody comes, sniffing around? What do you mean? He said, What happens if when a Russian sub or a Chinese sub decides to come into these waters? And the guy just burst out laughing. Go, really? And I said, yeah, I'm serious. No, they're not getting anywhere close to this stuff. And I suspect that's because China can talk all it wants to, and Russia can talk all it wants to, and this is true for the Air Force, true for the Marines, Army, and Navy as well. You have a new weapon system, or you got this groovy supersonic missile, whatever. I'll tell you what they don't have is they don't have a network of sensors where we have microphones under the water of the entire surface of the planet. Used to be just across the GI-UK gap and the little gap between Greenland and Iceland and Great Britain, where the Russian surface and submarine fleets would have to come down to attack NATO convoys. We used to have listening buoys there. We got them everywhere now. We can hear. I don't know this for a fact. I'd be amazed if it weren't true. I don't want to know, because if they capture me and torture me, I'm going to give it to them in 10 seconds. But it seems to me that very likely, exceedingly likely, in fact, it seems to me a practical certainty that we know where every single submarine and surface ship on the planet is at all times. I think we know at all times. One of the hardest things about listening for a submerged contact in a submarine is the sound of your own sub. These don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about their weight. They can just sit there at the bottom of the ocean and listen. And I would imagine that the intelligence net and the computer net that is processing all of these different sonar targets is extraordinarily sophisticated. And I know this must be true because, as a strange little story, my mother's father did the same thing. My mother's father, my grandfather, Alfred, whom I am named after, was in the Royal Marines, and after World War II, he was in the Royal Navy, worked with Royal Naval Intelligence, and he was given the Order of the British Empire for his work after the war. And what my grandfather did was he knew, it wasn't the whole ocean, but it was Britain's ocean. He knew every single ship in the Mediterranean. He knew where it was going, and what it was carrying. And he didn't have sensor nets or satellites or electronic computers or anything like that. My grandfather, along with the rest of these bright men in Royal Navy Mediterranean Command, had a gigantic, enormous map of the Mediterranean, just like their RAF counterparts did. And they had little wooden blocks, and these blocks had the name of the ship written on it. And they would just move them along with little push sticks, like croupier sticks from the casinos. And you could ask my grandfather at any given time of day or night, for the years he did it. You could say, we have a ship named this, and it's left this port 2 days ago. And he'll say it'll be in Messina at 1100 on Thursday. Or we've got something out there we don't know what it is. It's got one funnel. It's about 270 feet long. It's probably the Lancashire, that kind of thing. So China doesn't have any of these things. That's not that they don't have intelligence, but they don't have this kind of coordination. They don't have this kind of sensor net. Submarines, certainly, and surface ships to some degree. The best way I've ever heard of it is described as a submarine combat is it's a game of hide and seek with bazookas. So the problem's not killing the guy. You put a torpedo into another submarine, and it's pretty much the end of the argument. The question is not lethality. The question is detection. And as soon as you've detected the enemy, your chances have gone. And he hasn't. Assuming you detect the enemy before he detects you, your chances have become astronomically greater. And I was worried about North Korean Navy launching missiles out of a sub. They did a subsurface launch, or either that or they went to the surface and launched. But in any event, I thought the ability to move those missiles around is not good for us, complicates things for us. And then I thought, as if that sub is ever going to have a chance to launch, never. That North Korean missile boat, if that thing starts to come up and hover at launch depth, and they hear the doors opening, and we were convinced that this was real serious effort, that thing would be a hole in the water before anything ever happened. I bet you I know for a fact those Korean subs, whatever they are being pursued by American subs, and we can probably hear the Korean subs from Hawaii when they're heading out of their ports in Korea. I'm quite certain that when Chinese submarines and Russian submarines leave their ports, they are tailed immediately by very, very capable crews. Moving out of Los Angeles-class submarines now into Virginia-class subs, which are even better. And so it's something to make you sleep a little easier at night. It makes me sleep easier at night. Anyway, let's do a couple more and we'll move on, I'm afraid, until next week. Lee McCarthy. Am I the only one who thinks the allegation that the Russians hacked and altered evidence in the Mueller investigation is just a preemptive excuse because the investigation is not going to show a crime by Trump? It's not just a preemptive excuse, Lee. As far as I can see, it is. This is what I try to be good at. How would you describe this? I'm gonna manufacture a case out of whole cloth, and when I'm asked what the evidence is for this case, I'm going to present the manufactured evidence as the evidence. In other words, somebody very, very pithily wrote this. I think it was in a tweet or something. I don't remember who it was. I wish it did. But they basically said they had like a kind of a parody conversation between the FBI and a judge who was needed to sign a warrant on Trump or on one of Trump's associates. And basically, from memory, just hacking at it, it went something like this: we need a subpoena to raid the offices of Trump's lawyer. And the judge says, "Well, what makes you think you need to raid his offices?" And then the FBI says, "Well, because there's evidence that he has been in collusion with the Russians." And the judge says, "Well, what evidence is there?" And then the FBI guy says, "Well, there's been reports throughout the media that this has been happening." And then the judge says, "Where did the media stories come from?" And the FBI says, "From us." And then the judge says, "Where do I sign?" That's it. And thank you for the Bedford incident reference in the comments. It's a well-deserved search if you can find the Bedford incident. It's a terrific movie. Oh, by the way, we were talking about World War I earlier. They Shall Not Go Old is apparently now in wider release. It's the film I mentioned about where Peter Jackson took the most advanced computer imagery technology in the world and turned World War I from a grainy, jumpy black and white experience into actual people talking. It's unbelievable. You should go see that. And I also stumbled on, if you really want to get to the heart of World War I, really get to it, I stumbled on a 2017 release of a play that was written right after World War I called The Voyage Home. And you can rent that on Apple or I'm sure on Netflix. I cannot recommend that highly enough. The Voyage Home is great because it's a World War I movie with essentially zero combat. I mean, there's a little combat in the middle, little bit, and then kind of a hellacious thing at the end. But The Journey Home is a particularly compelling piece of literature because it was the only time in the war that the British were on defense and knew that the attack was coming. Almost all of the attacking was done by the French and the British. They did the attacking. They knew that they're going to go over the top and so on. But they were going to give the attack. A couple times the Germans surprised them with an attack. But The Journey Home is about the Michael offensives in 1918, where the British knew that it's going to happen any day now. And it's about this regiment that rotates back up to the lines. And they hear it's getting closer and closer, and they've got to be in the trenches for 6 days. 6 days in, and then they rotate out again. And it's looking more and more likely, and then they capture some prisoners, and they find out it's going to be Thursday. So 3 days from now, 2 days from now, tomorrow, this morning, the entire German army is coming. And wow, it's a real. Oh yeah, Scott Ott's bugging out, taking off early, I guess, because he's got some more. Thank you, buddy. Good to see you. He's an amazing guy, that Scotty. We need to have a fund drive so that so we can employ that boy, get him doing the work he should be doing, which is what he's doing now. He's just magnificent at it. It's not just he's been great on camera for 10 years now, but the stuff he's doing backstage here at our company is astonishing. And for those of you who've been longtime members, if all of a sudden things start to work and do the things they're supposed to do in the way they're supposed to, that'll be him. Because God knows it's not me. So anyway, the journey home, can't recommend it highly enough. So we'll do one more, okay? And then I got a couple things I need to do, and we'll be back next Thursday. Okay, I've got a question here from Ashley Rose, but I also know that Eric Blake has imminent danger of having the arteries in his neck explode if I don't pick one of his questions. So I will do Ashley's question, and then I will do Eric Blake's question, so that those of you who may be within the blast radius of Eric can just take a pill for this one. I think you'll be all right for the next week. Okay, so here we go. First, we'll do Ashley Rose. And she says, hoping third time's a charm. That's why I took it. Good evening, Bill. As two aspiring clinical psychologists, Jake Sorticus and I are increasingly terrified of the current state of both academia and the field of psychology as a whole. This is especially the case in light of the recent guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men from the APA. I know this story. I haven't read the rest of it, but I know exactly where you're going with it. As individuals who want to help people and who feel as though we are standing in front of an avalanche trying to prevent it alone, we faced a great amount of doubt. We're wondering, do you think there's any hope for the field of psychology? Do we need to pursue other routes completely disconnected from academia? We know academia may be lost, but we still believe in the utility of clinical training and practice, which unfortunately come through higher education in psychology. Thanks and warm regards from us both. Ashley, that was a lovely letter. Thank you, and best to Jake as well. So, yes, there's hope, and it was clarified for me over the weekend. It's something I've been hanging on to, but it became much clearer for me over the weekend, so I'll back up a little bit and tell you some of the backstory in a second. First of all, psychologists are absolutely essential. A good therapeutic psychologist is the difference between living and dying for some people, and I'm one of them. I'm here today because of two psychologists, and I really mean that. I'm not saying I would have, jumped off a bridge, but I wouldn't be in this chair, and that's for damn sure. If it hadn't been for two exceptional psychologists and now kind of a third one, hypnotherapist, who's really helping me. So what you do is absolutely essential, and it can't go away. On a related note, I think that academia, as we understand it, is finished. I think that brick and mortar universities are finished. I think they're done. I think that their reputation has been irretrievably damaged, and that there's so much, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the perfect word too. What is it? It's not dreck, but it's something like dreck, gunk, whatever. There's so much gunk and dreck in the pipeline that it's going to be years and years and years of getting worse before it starts to get better. And I frankly think it's done. I just think it's over. Colleges have become the place where you go to ensure that you don't learn anything. Now you go to college to make sure that under no circumstances do you hear opposing points of view. That's what college is now. And so since the left took over, this is what the left does. And I saw this, I think Iowa Hawk did a tweet on it. I think I saw it this morning on Instapundit. The left does basically this: find a respected institution, occupy it, destroy it, and then walk around wearing its skin and demand apologies if anybody dares to call you on it. So that's bad news. The good news is, Ashley, that is that you, just as, and also because it's part of the same kind of social evolution, but just as the brick and mortar universities are becoming absolutely irrelevant, so too is the internet's ability to educate people to extremely high levels, starting to evolve and improve. And you may not like the sound of this, but I would get used to it. If you're anybody, I'd get used to this. I've been living a gig-based life for pretty much the last 30 years, maybe more. And what I mean by that is, if you're interested in working in show business, it's for most of the time it was virtually impossible. Lately, it has become essentially impossible that you would find lifelong work. So when you work in show business, you are prepared to work on a gig basis, and it's extremely uncomfortable emotionally. It's hard. It's really hard on you. And the reason it's hard on you is because there's no certainty. You can't plan on anything. You don't have any idea what your income is going to be. You've gotten a job. Okay, that's good. And it's a good job, and it's paying pretty well. That's good, too. And how long is it going to last? Oh, 3 weeks. Okay, I better be looking for something after that. Or worse, you think it's going to last a year or 2 years, and then they cancel it mid-season. And almost as bad as that is where I was at when I was editing Sunday Morning Shootout for 5 years. I ended up being employed for 5 years, which is lifetime employment. I mean, it's eternal salvation in show business to have the same job for 5 years. But the problem with having that job for 5 years was only that I didn't know I was going to have it for 5 years. I had a 3-month job for 5 years, meaning every 3 months we would find out whether we were still afloat or not, and you couldn't plan on it. And it's pretty tough. But with that said, I suspect that all of the kind of traditional, I would say, let's just say accreditation and licensing mechanisms, I think they're kind of on their way out. I think all of this stuff is on the way out. In some cases it's good news, some cases it's not, but I wouldn't be surprised that if in 10 years or so, maybe less, people like you were not working directly with patients who come to you through, I don't know if they say through social media, but come to you through internet connections. And that before too much longer, the academic credentials may be completely, essentially ignored, and you will get retain and get new patients based on a system very much like eBay. Very much like, she is a 5-star psychologist. Cannot recommend her highly enough. You're going to Yelp your way into the world. There's no question, none, that this is not the kind of thing that you can just go out and do. Same with engineering. You can't just go out and start engineering if you're going to be building bridges. You can go and play around with things. It's a good start. But things like doctors and so on, you need an extremely intense education for a very long period of time, but that doesn't necessarily have to happen in a university. It probably better to happen when you have 1 or 2 people in the same study group, but homeschooling, you could have made the case maybe that a homeschool kid didn't know more than a kid who was educated in a British school like I was in the 1960s, because that was an unbelievably rigorous and structured education. But there's absolutely no question, and I mean none, that homeschooled kids are infinitely smarter, and not just more educated, smarter than the rest of the kids. So I think your chance of I don't think psychologists are going away. On the contrary, if you are wondering what to do with your life, I would either go into the medical profession or the psychiatric care profession, because when these millennials who through no fault of their own, they didn't pick their own educational standards. But when the people who take care of them begin to die, there's going to be a generation-wide nervous breakdown. I just have no doubt of it. If your entire life you've been get the participation trophy, and you've never been allowed to fail, and you've never been allowed to succeed, and you go looking for your safe space when you hear something that might offend you. That is arrested development. It's a generational neurosis, and they are going to hit ground, and they're going to hit ground hard, and hard when they begin to realize that there's no longer anybody to protect them. I've heard anecdotally that there's stories of psychologists now who are starting to see people in their late 30s and 40s who are coming to them and having essentially panic attacks because they don't know how to do their laundry. They're 35, 40-year-old woman. She doesn't know how to do the laundry, and she needs to have clothes cleaned, and she doesn't know how to do it. Not only does she not know how to do it, that's easy to learn. If you can teach a college bachelor how to do his laundry, for God's sake, you can teach anybody. So it's not that she can't learn how to do it. It's that it's too much for her emotionally. It's just too big. It's too big of a burden. Doing your laundry is they can't handle it. It's too stressful. So yes, we're going to be needing a lot of psychologists. We're going to need armies of psychologists. And I just thought of something clever. I was just thinking of something very clever. You could even say that the crisis is going to become so severe that you're going to need to parachute into cities, in which case you'd be a parapsychologist. But anyway, so there's that. But now to the main issue. What Ashley and Jake were referring to is that some of the latest guidelines from the American Psychiatric Association has recently basically said that anything that you would consider to be a masculine trait is essentially a disorder. And masculinity, as it's understood by all of us, is a mental illness. That's what they're saying. They're saying that toxic masculinity, which means things like holding doors for women and not crying when there's a car accident and people need help, and courage, all those things. That all of these things are psychologies. They're disorders, psychiatric disorders. And when you find out what the consequences are, they'll say one of the many harmful effects of traditional masculinity are things like risk-taking, competition. All of these things are looked at as horrible outcomes, and stifling of boys' emotional states. In other words, boys are defective girls, and we've got to teach them that right away, and we've got to make sure that they're as hysterical as young women are, and we've got to make sure that whatever they do, they don't follow their own instincts. So all of this up to this point is bad news, except for the part of not needing to go to college to get a college education. But here's the thing that I think will help you, Ashley and Jake, and maybe the rest of you. And I got it very clearly just this last weekend. I was pitching the Aurora Project to my favorite group down in Ramona, California. It's out in the country, small group of people. I just love the venue. I love the space. I love the people. It's just my favorite event. And I was talking once again about how this generation of young men are abandoning the world that we live in to go to live in a world where they get to act like conservatives, where the reason so many young men are addicted to computer games is because they're addicted to freedom. They're addicted to being heroic. They like to drive fast and blow things up, and they like to shoot things, and they like to get the pat on the back from their friends, and they like to work together as a team, but not be together as a collective, and so on and so on and so on. And that's when it occurred to me that this is in fact the entire essence of conservatism. And if you want to put it in a nutshell, Ashley, what I said to those people down there was, no matter how hard you try, you cannot beat the biology out of people. You cannot beat the biology out of people. If you tell young men to be young women, and if you make it so unpleasant for them to do anything that they feel is they're naturally inclined to do, without father figures and strong fathers to basically, tell these feminists to just, hey, that's enough. That's enough of this nonsense. Son, you don't have to listen to this lunatic, this neurotic. You can't beat the biology out of people. And this generation that's in college now has been brutalized by the left, and has had the left determined to beat the biology out of people, which is why they're going into the world of Star Wars and Star Trek and computer games and Doctor Who. They're bringing their ideology into the places where these young men have escaped from, and they're trying to track them down and kill them. That's why there's so much rage towards the left now. Rage, incandescent rage. When I was answering questions on that one, Ashley, somebody said, "Okay, well that's for guys. I mean, what do you have for women?" And I said, "Well, first of all, there's a significant number of women who play computer games and so on. But let's put that aside. I'm not really talking about reaching them." I said, what I'm doing is we're getting the women back to our side by producing better men, because you can't beat the biology out of people. I saw a study not too long ago, I want to say a week ago, 10 days ago, where they basically interviewed ultra-feminist social justice warriors, young women, the absolute far left screaming Antifa lunatics. And they asked these young women what they thought about feminist men. And it turns out they didn't have a very high opinion of them at all. They didn't like them. They didn't want to date them. Weren't interested in them in any way, except as perhaps another sign to be carried in a protest. And almost all, whether they know it or not, I suspect they don't know it, but a significant portion, I'd say an easy majority of the feminist men out there are feminists because they think it's the way that they're going to get laid. They think, okay, so the women are feminists, I'll be a feminist too. And next thing you know, ta-da. I was going to say we're making out in the back seat of the car, but they don't have cars, so maybe they take an Uber out to some field or something. So what that meant was, and the additional study went on to confirm this apparently, was that even the young women who are shrieking the most about the patriarchy, screaming about microaggressions, mansplaining, manspreading, all of this, all of it, the ones that just cannot stop talking about how evil and awful men are, find that the men that agree with them to be weak and pointless and silly, which is telling me they are attracted to guys who are the same kind of guys that women have always been attracted to. What these feminists are doing, these social justice warriors are doing, the males, is they're basically taking the strategy of, well, sure, she's going out with a football player, but if I do all her homework for her and I'm at her beck and call 24 hours a day, then she'll definitely have the hots for me. It doesn't work that way. And so the good news here is what I said earlier. You can't beat the biology out of men, and you can't beat the biology out of women either. They cannot control it. They can, in their heads, do everything they want to, dedicate every waking hour to destroying this idea of strong men, but the reason that they're so obsessed with destroying strong men is because they know that strong men have something that they don't have, and it's not the biological pieces. They can't handle the fact that men are capable of a different way of thinking, that they are not as subject to their emotions, at least not if they're raised correctly. And they're able to, women connect everything to everything else. Everything's connected to everything else. Men can simply just deal with the problem. I've mentioned it a few times before. It is one of the most important things I ever saw. Somebody could probably figure it out, get a link up there for me, but it was a discussion that a psychologist was having, and he came out on stage and he had a man's head and a woman's head, like a plaster bust of them, and he said, "Okay, so let's talk about the male mind," and he stands behind the male head and he said, "The male mind is like a tackle box that you have when you go fishing. It's made up of all these little drawers, and inside a drawer are individual things, and there's bunches of drawers. And the way that men think is they'll think, okay, I'm going to open up the paycheck drawer or the job drawer, and I'm going to think about my job and my paycheck, and I'm going to worry about this or the money or whatever I need on budget. I'm going to close that drawer, and then I'm going to open up my drawer that deals with my wife, and I'm going to close that drawer, and I'm going to open up the door that deals with what's going on with football." And that you think of these things sequentially, and you open a drawer, you look at it, you think about it, put it back, and then you move on to the next thing. And he had the incredible insight to say, and ladies, the thing that's going to surprise you the most is the drawer that the men spend most of their time in doesn't have anything in it. And all the women laugh and titter, "Ha, ha, 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 men are so stupid, ha, ha, ha." That's not what he's saying. He's saying that men have an ability to just check out of the emotions of it. We don't have to be slaves to it. We can simply say, "I'll deal with that later." And that's an incredible, unbelievable advantage. It's an unbelievable advantage. And since we don't see things as all connected to each other, and since we're dealing with things one box at a time, and I'm speaking in generalizations, obviously, but they're strong generalizations, men have the ability to kind of bore down onto a problem, whether it's making the perfect fly fishing lure or building a fusion reactor. They have the ability to bore down on it because there are no distractions. There's nothing else pulling their attention. They are on this project. They're going to build this spaceship. They're gonna dig this tunnel. They're gonna go on this mission, whatever. And that's what they think about. And nothing gets in the way of that. So that's how men think, according to this guy. Then he walks over to the other side of the stage, and he said, "Now let's talk about how women think." I said, men's brains are like little boxes that they open and close. He said, a woman's brain is like a ball of wire, just a giant ball of copper wire through which electricity passes, and everything touches everything else. Everything's connected to everything, and all the time. And so when a man decides that maybe we're going to go over to our friend's house for dinner, the guy throws on a pair of shoes and maybe pants that don't have a hole in it, and a T-shirt that's not been in the hamper for more than a day or two. But because that's all he cares about. He's got to be clothed so he doesn't get arrested. He's not going there to be looked at for fashions. He doesn't give a hell. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to us. Looks like Astronerd's got it up there in the comment section here. But he was saying, but a woman, when she dresses for the dinner, is thinking about things like this. Susie is a little overweight, so I don't want to wear anything that makes me look much thinner than her. And plus, George is in some trouble of being laid off. I know because I spoke to her about it last night. And I don't want to dress too rich, or I certainly don't want to look like we're making more money than them. And at the same time, I don't really want to dress down for them. So I got to think about something that just seems casual enough, but respectful enough. And I want to, and just on and on and on. And I hear this thing, and it's like, man, that's just terrible. Wow. But it makes sense. I mean, all of it makes sense. These traditional roles make sense because if you're going to be out there for 3 days with a sharp stick, crapping in the woods, trying to find a elephant to bring down and take home, that requires a different skill set than people who are either staying at home and building things and communicating with each other and constantly taking care of not just the children but all of the social connections. You would develop 2 different brains like that. So, a long answer to a very good question. The reason I am less worried than I used to be, I'm not worried. The reason I'm less worried than I used to be that they are going to be able to define masculinity and all of these traditional values away, just define them away and program people into being what they are, I've come to realize that all the evidence is against that. That you cannot beat the biology out of people. That men are going to want to do men things, women are going to want to do women things. And when I said to that woman who asked the question, what are you going to do for young women? I said, at the very least, we're going to make better men for them. All the women just cheered and applauded. They certainly need better men, and the men need better women too. I don't know why this has to be viewed as a contest or a zero-sum game or something. It's like, well, the men win or the women win. It's just nuts. It's just they're different, and some people are good at some things, and some people are good at other things. And doesn't restrict you to an occupation or anything. I mean, I'm good at talking, not so good at bookkeeping, and I don't consider that to be a contest. It's just, proclivities and stuff. But if you try to fight them, and you have to destroy them if you're going to be a progressive, the idea that a man can run faster than a woman is not allowed. It's not only not allowed, it can't be true. And anybody who says it's true must be destroyed. Just ask Martina Navratilova about that. So, the good news is sometimes the worse it gets, the better it gets. I did not think I would see this generation of millennials and younger take up arms against the left. I thought they'd be completely, 4 or 5 generations now, be completely brainwashed into being, all of them being social justice warriors. But turns out that, as usual, they've overplayed their hand, and I think Jordan Peterson is great data on the fact that people are ready to have somebody just come out and speak the truth about this, give men permission to be men. And Eric says that women are better at the gun range. Certainly my woman is. I don't know whether she'd be better in a full-on firefight, but she is death on wheels with her .22. She outshot the Beretta I got her in a month, and had to get her a Buckmark competition pistol because she was so much better than the gun was. And in target practice, pretty much using pretty much any weapon, she's a much better shot than I am. I'm a decent shot. I'm not a bad shot, but she's a much better shot, Natasha. Much better. And she always argues with me about it, and I say, honey, it's not something that I'm ashamed of, something I'm proud of. You're a much better shot than me, and you've never picked up a gun before, but a year and a half ago. And she says it's because she's a photographer, and she has to keep things perfectly still and look down the sight line and all the rest of it. May be true, maybe not. But, and by the way, I'm not, when I'm bouncing millennials, I'm obviously talking about the social justice warriors. The military, you've heard me speak about the military earlier. Eric said, don't forget we fought Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And you did. You not only fought Al-Qaeda and ISIS, a lot of older millennials kicked the living crap out of Iraq and Afghanistan and all the rest of those bad people. So I'm obviously not talking about them. I'm talking about the culture as a whole. So yes, Natasha's a much better shot than I am at a shooting range. Now, whether she's as good a shot as I am if somebody's shooting back, that is still an open question, one that I hope we don't ever have to settle. But I have a suspicion about it. So there you go, right? There you go. 105-pound Navy jet mechanic trying to torque a prop out piece. Leolis is saying 105-pound Navy jet mechanic trying to torque a prop nut onto a P3 Orion does a full pull-up on the wrench, pulls on the wrench as hard as possible, and she doesn't weigh enough to actually turn the wrench to a sufficient torque level. Well, that nut doesn't care who put it on, and that nut doesn't care the intentions of the people that put it on. That nut only cares about whether or not it is torqued sufficiently to stay on and keep the propeller on board during the vibrations you encounter in flight. And it doesn't care who put it on. It needs to know, is it torqued to an adequate tightness, or is it not? And if it's not, then it's going to come off. And if it comes off, people are going to probably get killed. And I don't like to see people get killed because other people insist that a 105-pound woman be able to apply 200 foot-pounds of torque. It's just insane. And the last one we will do is Mr. Eric Blake. And he says, Vectron Whittle, I like the approach, good lead. So the Oscars announced no host this year in the wake of Kevin Hart and so forth. So hypothetical scenario. You're the boss of the Academy. Who would you appoint to host the Oscars, and how else would you clean up the ceremony? I would appoint myself to host it, and I would clean up the cemetery. That's what I meant to say. The ceremony. I'd clean up the cemetery by basically informing them that it is in fact a cemetery. Sometimes the Freudian slips really can tell you a lot. Clean up the Oscar cemetery. And I remember a couple months ago we were talking about BillWhittle.com subscribers, and I said BillWhittle.com survivors, and that rang too. The fact that they, I mean, we were talking just a minute ago about them going too far. It's one thing to chase people out of the college and to chase them out of society, but when you chase them into where they've gone to get away from you, into their caves or their dens, basically, then you're going to start get people growling and biting back. And in a way, I didn't hear this news, by the way, about there not being a host or hostess or hostiatrix. But it's kind of the ultimate. It's kind of the ultimate concession that this political correctness is just a fire that consumes its own. They're basically saying that this young, hip, black comedian is not liberal enough for us. In fact, what they're saying is no one is predictably liberal enough for us. And since there's nobody liberal enough for us, we can't have a host, because who knows if they may have said something that would have been offensive to some person, someday, somewhere. Darkwater says it's host privilege. That's exactly right. They're suffering. They need to check their privilege. Then there you go. It's almost like a kind of a sick kind of game, and it's kind of like it's like a car there's a bridge out and you're on a road and it's raining, and as you turn the corner you see the bridge is out and you step on the brakes, and the question is, what's going to happen first? Are you going to be able to stop, or is it going to just go over the edge? And that's what I think about with our society now. Are conservatives going to surrender to the left, which is going over the cliff, or can we hang on long enough for them to simply run out of speed, just run out of energy? They cannot have, yes, love it, Uptick Mick, love it. They should have had participation Oscars. Exactly. What a genius idea that is. That's the best idea I've ever heard, ever. I think that's the best political idea I've heard in 10 years. Exactly. The answer is to say all actors deserve the Best Actor award. We can't give the Best Actor statue to one person. They all deserve it. Who are we to say that one person's efforts are better than somebody else's? And who are we to signal somebody out for special recognition when there are other actors who are perfectly good actors, in many cases as fine or as good as somebody else? How can we possibly give out a Best Actor award or a Best Picture award? That's the answer. That's the answer. It's just great. I love it. I love it so much. It's just absolutely brilliant. Exactly. This is what your worldview says. No one's better than anybody else. No one can make any judgments about anything. No one's allowed to have an opinion on anything. And that's what we're going to enforce on everybody. So therefore, enforce it on yourselves. And you don't get your applause, which is the fuel for which you live. This is your oxygen, is this people applauding you and taking pictures of you. Well, that's all going to go because it's not fair that you should be singled out, you know. There are plenty of immigrant actors, for example, who are locked out of Hollywood by this privilege, and why don't they deserve a chance? And if I said this to that audience, most of them would believe me. Most of them would say, he's right. He's right. We shouldn't have a Best Picture, and he's right. We should turn over our roles to immigrant actors or gender fluid actors, or why should we continue to give this award to actors of talent when we should be giving it to all actors? It's beautiful. It's great. You see, the thing that I know a little bit more of than you guys, only because I've lived here long enough and I've moved in these circles and I've seen it firsthand. You've seen it as much as the rest of the culture has, but you haven't really seen behind the scenes. You have no idea how barking mad insane these people are. I mean, you just have no idea how crazy they are and how tiny they are and how petty they are. For years now, certainly since I was working on the Shootout show that started in 2003, I'm sure it's much longer than that's probably 30 or 40 years now. Used to be the Academy Awards. Okay. It's a chance for us to dress up in the studios, get some mileage out of it, publicity, and so on. And then we have to add the Golden Globes because some people don't get Academy Awards and some people aren't making money off the Academy Awards, so they have to make something off else, so we have the Golden Globes. And then we have the People's Choice Awards, and then we have the SAG Guild Awards. Then we have the Directors Guild Award. We have the Writers Guild Awards. We have all of these awards. And the term for this out here is kudos season. And it's all you need to know about the mental state of the people who are telling you that they're better than they are. The people who are out here shaping the culture, not just the actors, but the producers, writers, all of them, live for an Oscar nomination or an Emmy nomination or a Grammy. It's so ironic that these people who've been talking about the participation trophy generation and basically invented the idea, their dearest wish for which they would sacrifice a limb without any problem whatsoever is to have a little golden idol that they can put on their mantelpiece to show other people that they're better than they are. When you go into an actor's house and you see pretty much every one of them, the first thing you see when you come in is the Oscar or Oscars. He's basically saying, yeah, I'm a much better actor than you or anybody else. And they live for this. Because as a general rule, people in show business are all about getting the recognition that they didn't get when they were young, and they will do anything for it. And one of the things they'll do for it is tell everybody that we should allow homeless people to live on our doorsteps. Who are we to say that just because we can afford a house that we should have this property to ourselves? They'll say that in public, then they'll go to their compounds and lock themselves in, like any sensible person would. But the need, it's just an endless bottomless pit of need, of ego need, and you can shovel coal into that thing day and night, and you will never, ever, ever, ever make them happy. In fact, I've often felt that, now obviously there are exceptions, but I've often felt that there's probably nothing worse that can happen to a particular kind of person than to become a movie star. Because the kind of person that's driven by that is a person with no sense of internal self-respect or even identity. They know that that if they get rich, they'll be happy. If they get famous, they'll be happy. If they become a celebrity, they'll be happy. And they're utterly convinced of this, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 million people behind the orange wall back there are convinced of it. Some of them are working actors, most of them are waiting tables, but they know that someday they're going to have a chance to show off, and maybe they have real talent, maybe they don't, but what they really want is they want to be recognized, and I want to be recognized too. I'm far from immune for this, and when people think I'm making a judgment about them, the reason I do what I do is because I'm one of them. But they want recognition, and they want the fame, and they want the money, and they want all of it. They know enough from watching from the outside the absolute incredible aphrodisiac effect of fame has on women as a general rule. It's just really shocking. And if you need any evidence of this, just look at some of the people that Mick Jagger has dated. So they want it all. They know that if they can get the role and knock it out and get another role and knock that out, then they will become famous actors. And then they will have everything. They will have recognition. They'll have lots of money. They'll get to do their job, which is kind of a play job. Mine's a play job too. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I live in this Star Trek museum, which is paid for by you wonderful people, and I think about things and talk about them. As Xtesh just said, you love me. You really love me. This is Sally Fields. This is Sally Fields after 2 or 3 decades of working in the field, 2 or 3 decades of being a very good actor. And Sally Fields gets her Oscar and gushes, you like me, you really like me, or love me, I forget, I think it's like me, you like me, you really like me. Here's the proof, see? You couldn't possibly like me because of the fact I'm a nice person. Here's the proof. I've got the tink, 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 tink. I've got the evidence. I've got the gold statue. It's a shame it's a shame it's a guy with a sword. Really should have been a golden calf, honestly. Would have been a much better, much cleaner kind of a transaction if it was a little golden calf that they could worship. Oh, well, now Martin Archer. Now, this is something that interests me. Martin Archer says live, if you're watching live, it's always fun. You wouldn't believe some of the things I saw as a manager of a popular restaurant in on Melrose Avenue. I would, Martin, but I'll bet most people wouldn't. Do you have time to type me up a quick story? And while you're doing that, I'll tell you mine. I was a limo driver when I got out to LA in 1988 and drove limousines until 1992. We were based in Pasadena, taking executives to the airport, and I didn't get to deal with very many movie stars at all. I leapt on the chance to drive DeForest Kelley, which was one of the high points of my life, but other than that, not too many. But there were limousine companies that did nothing but cater to celebrities. And we weren't one of them, and that was fine with me. But there's a place called the Pasadena Playhouse, and we're based in Pasadena. And one night, I got an order to pick up somebody from the Pasadena Playhouse where they were doing, what's the name of that play? It's a play where they're reading from books. It slipped my mind. The nice thing is it pops up whenever I need to know something. It automatically appears in 6, 7, 8 seconds. It's a story where 2 people are reading love letters back to each other. Maybe it's called Love Letters. I think maybe that's it. Anyway, it's the kind of thing where both actors stand at a podium and they read this thing opposite each other. And so I go to the theater to pick up somebody backstage, and what do you know? Not big names, but I knew who they were. Meredith Baxter Birney got in the back, and she was dating, apparently, felt like she was married to another actor named Dan Hedaya, who's just fantastic. He's in Buckaroo Banzai, and and in Blood Simple. He's a really, really interesting character actor. Holy cow, Dan Hedaya and Meredith Baxter Birney. So I drive, I don't say a word. They don't want to talk to me. It's interesting that when you're a limousine driver, they really assume that you're just deaf. You can't hear a thing. You're made out of stone. You're not a real person. Why would they care about you? It's not like not like that driver is ever going to have enough of an audience to talk about this. Okay, so we're driving from Pasadena to her house in Brentwood, I think it was, which is about a 40-minute drive at nighttime. And she got into the car, and we closed the door, and I started driving off, and it went a little something like this. I was just awful. No, honey, you were great. Meredith Baxter Birney was the one on stage. No, I was just terrible. I was terrible. I flubbed every single line. Baby, you got laughs. Everything you said, you got laughs in all the right places. People just went crazy. And I look so old. I just look so old. I can't believe how old I look. No, honey, honestly, you look fantastic, darling. You look absolutely wonderful. I didn't even know the inflections. I just blew all of my cues. But, honey, now imagine that at that pace and at that emotional pitch for 40 minutes. You think you can imagine it for 40 minutes, but you can't. Because when you've heard this for 10 minutes, you begin to get the DTs. And after 30 minutes, you want to simply pull the car over, get out a tire iron, and put this poor person out of her misery. And that's exactly what it was. It was a well-known, wealthy, famous actress, good-looking woman who was Eric says, was she serious or just fishing for compliments? She was seriously fishing for compliments. She was so utterly insecure and so utterly neurotic that she needed 40 minutes of constant reassurance in order to get through the ride home. You know? It's just pathetic. It was just pathetic. I felt sorry for her. I really did. I thought she needs to be in a home, in a hospital. And I thought, my God, you know, you're Meredith Baxter Birney. That's not the same exactly thing as being Angelina Jolie, but people recognize you everywhere. You were on television for a long time. You were in, what was the family thing with Michael J. Fox? And then she was also in Bridget Loves Bernie. And so she was well known. And she's wealthy, and she's living in this incredible house in this incredibly Tony neighborhood. She's made a living at doing what she wants to do in a very tough profession. Family ties, thank you. And she's completely just bat guano insane, just insane. And my respect for Dan Hedaya went up and down at the same time. And I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, so let's see what our friend Martin Archer has to say about these people that I've hung around with and he's hung around with. They're not the very best people I've ever met. So Martin Archer, who apparently used to help manage a restaurant on Melrose Avenue, says Jerry Seinfeld used to come in with a buddy when his show was still on. More than once, this group of guys would seat themselves near him. They would always have an attractive, busty girl with them, and they'd get her to show off and fondle her almost bare breasts in order to try and attract Seinfeld's attention. That's impressive. So you go to a restaurant and you know Jerry Seinfeld frequents the restaurant, and you're either a comedy writer or a comic actor. He's hiring, and so you come to this restaurant time and time again with a half-naked woman, three-quarter naked woman, and you sit in his line of vision, and you basically just feel her up and long enough for him to look over and pay attention to you. I find that kind of thing to be just a little bit crass, personally. Anyway, there we go. Yeah, it's turned into a long night. I was hoping to keep it a short night. I've got to go. I've got a few things to do in the back room, and then, honey, I'm coming home. And it's really great to see so many of the Aurora Republic people here in the live show, and Olimir especially is a real pleasant surprise. That guy is the second deadliest pilot I've ever seen. And we're gonna practice as a flight element, and we're gonna train those eagles up as teams. We're gonna do twos and twos and twos, watching out for each other and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that'll do it. When might this be up on YouTube? This might be up on YouTube right now. I'm going to turn off the lights. I'm going to upload it and get it done. And then I'm probably going to go home and get some sleep, but somewhere in the next couple days, I will get back into the practice arena commander, and I will start shooting down bad guys with guns at 4 kilometers beyond visual range. Can't see them yet. Just blow them up. Takes practice, but once you can do it, you feel good. It's good. You can't be a pretend president or a pretend squadron leader and be a miserable shot and a lousy politician. You don't have to be the best, but you got to be good. So that'll do it. All right. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. It's a good time. Good to have everybody here. Sorry about all the stress in the beginning and the late start, but we will hopefully see you again next Thursday night. Let's check. Let's check, because Bill's doing some traveling. You will not see me next Thursday night because I will be in Redlands next Thursday night. If I can do the show on Wednesday, I will, but it's a long day, so I'm not making any promises. But in any event, we'll be here. Yeah, there's Olimir. Olimir, you and I together, we're gonna get you that M7, put it on the front of your Vanguard, and then we're gonna go out there. I got to get you a couple of, I got to get you 4 assailant 4s as well. Then we're going to go out into the verse, and you and I together, just the two of us, we're going to clean up every one of these matador bastards. We're just going to simply execute them. We're just going to go out there and jump them and execute them. There's a group of some very bad guys called matadors. They're relatively new term in gaming called griefers, which means they're not playing, and they're not even playing pirates or playing bad guys. They're simply ramming into ships to blow things up, simply to get, just simply to be elements of chaos and grief. And my favorite thing I said last time in Redlands was, on some level, the video game world is the real world. And this is the fantasy world. Down there are consequences for these kind of things. Down there, if you're a bully and a bastard, you pay for it. Down there, helping people comes naturally to folks, and most people trust each other. And down there, you work and you get paid. And when you get paid, you buy things you want. And usually the things you want are things that allow you to work harder, make more money. It's much more real in the computer world than it is up here in California, that's for sure. Anyway, all right, that'll do it. So thanks for joining us. We're going to hit the stop button. And we will, first of all, we will stop the recording, so we will see you next time right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.